Before, I would like to give you a background about the message for this morning, but before I do that, did anyone here know the word plogging before today? You did? Okay, so one person knew. Well, this is a new word to me, but it's something I've been doing for a while. So even when I was very young, growing up, it always bothered me to see trash in the street. So if I was walking, I would see trash, of course, if it was safe enough to pick up, like a can, soda can, I would just take it and I would trash it. And about over 10 years ago, actually, maybe 12 years ago, when I used to live in Manassas, I used to jog in this beautiful road, and there were trash, not a lot, but trash here, trash there. So I started bringing a bag with me, and I was jogging along. I would pick up the trash, collect, and then would trash it. And then the next day, I would enjoy a cleaner road. So that's how it all started. So the Lord gave me these ideas, I believe, back then, to write an article about plogging, which I didn't even know the word, and the spiritual lessons that you can learn from it. Now, plogging comes from the Swedish word plocka upp, which means pick up. So it's just a term that they made to describe the action. And now, basically on a daily basis, Aline and I, in our neighborhood, we have this beautiful road, and it's beautiful scene. It's not busy. It's such a joy just to walk there every morning. We can never get tired of it. But now and then, we see trash. And then, for over a year now, we've been picking up the trash the next morning. Many days, it's clean. So now, like I said, God gave me these ideas about the spiritual lessons of plogging. And so I wanted to write an article about 10 years ago. So I took all these notes, and for some reason, I lost the notes. It has to be home in some box, I don't know, but I never found the notes. So I had to start everything from scratch here. So anyway, I'm going to be sharing 8 spiritual lessons that I've learned from plogging. And so I'm not going to keep you here for more than 2 hours, I promise you. Just kidding. I'll try to make it fast. All right, so the first lesson, this is kind of the foundation. It's very basic, and it's a short one. So when the road was built, it was perfect, it was clean, there was nothing wrong with it. The same way God created the world beautiful, clean, there was nothing wrong about it. But then, as we know, sin entered into the world. So trash entered into the world. So as I say, trash and sin, I'm going to be using this word interchangeably, okay? So in Genesis 1:31 it says, "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good." And Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." So what is purpose? What is God's ideal for our lives? That we live a life without sin, without trash, just like he created the world perfect. So the lesson number 2 is we live in a sin-stricken world. And we have to face this reality, because we cannot just ignore sin and believe, everything is fine. No, we have to face the reality. So as we are studying in Ephesians now, it's a battle, and we need to know what battle we are fighting. So sometimes we may throw trash on the road ourselves. That's how trash appears on the road. I remember once riding with a friend of mine, someone who was a lawyer, professional, and he was drinking soda, I think, and then he opens the window and throws the cans out of the window, and I was like in complete shock to see that. So sometimes, unfortunately, we do that ourselves. Now, sometimes we may decide to try things in our life, drugs, steal, cheating, whatever the situation is. So we are bringing the trash to our own lives. The action is on us. Now, sometimes others will throw trash on our way. So it's not something that we are bringing in ourselves, but it's brought to us. So they may offer us drugs, they may come gossiping, and then we get involved with that gossiping, or they just encourage us to do whatever evil they're doing. Now, sometimes another way is the trash just spills from other people's cars as they're riding. Sometimes I find things as I go plogging, and I find things that I don't think they intended to trash. Things that are like tools or things that shouldn't be there. In the same way, we may see people living in a sinful way, and sometimes, by beholding, we become changed, especially if we stick around with individuals who do not follow God. We may start following that. So there are three main ways that trash can come to our road, to our way. Now, in something that illustrates this principle is Jesus' parable of the weeds in Matthew 13:27-30. I'm just going to read verses 27 and 28. And it says, "So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then has it tares? And then verse 28 it says, He said unto them, An enemy has done this." So who is behind? Even though we may have people in our lives who come, crosses our ways and bring these things to us, or even when we do that ourselves. So who is behind that? Satan, right? The enemy. So we always have to keep this in mind. So this is lesson number 2. Now, lesson number 3. So while we live in a sin-stricken world, we don't have to live in sin. And this is a lie that the enemy tries to convince us that, we have to live in sin. We don't have an option. So we all have a choice to make. Life is all about choices. Every morning when we wake up, we have a choice. Do you want to be positive? Do you want to be negative? What do you want to live? So when it comes to sin, to the trash, on our way, we can ignore the trash. When I go walking, Aline and I go every morning walking, we can ignore the trash, just leave it there, and or I can choose to remove it. I can even decide to start throwing trash on the road myself, since it's already dirty. I see trash here, trash there, so I'm eating something, or I can say, well, it's not a big deal. There's already trash, and I will go and throw the trash. Or we can take action and accept Christ's offer of help in our lives, and not accept the trash. So in Joshua 24:15, it says, "Choose you this day whom you will serve." And also Matthew 11:28 says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So basically, it's all about choice. And we have, God's support in our lives to accomplish that. Okay, so now lesson number 4. So while some small sins may not seem to be as a big deal, they are still dangerous. And sometimes we tend to minimize. Usually my sins are not as big as your sin. So that's a very dangerous way to think. So not all trash is the same. While trash is trash, they come in different sizes, shapes, and form. Some are smaller and somehow easier to handle. Some are too big for us to carry. Sometimes, or maybe often, those little sins have a snowball effect. Have you ever heard, or maybe you have done that yourself? You see that white lie, that little lie, and then someone catches it and start questioning, and then you have to do what? come up with another lie, and then, it turns into a snowball. So usually that's what happens. Some are too dangerous to handle without proper care. Like when we go plogging or walking, sometimes I look and say, okay, I'm not going to touch this. Or I may take something so I don't touch it, or sometimes I even leave it there until the next day so I have a proper way to handle it. So we have to be very careful. And sometimes we're able to carry the trash in our lives to Christ on our own. Christ gives us the invitation, bring to me. But sometimes the trash is such that, it's hard for us to handle. Because what does sin do to us? What is one thing that sin does to us that's very obvious and common? It blinds us. Sometimes we live in sin and we don't even realize, or we try to justify. Sin really blinds us. So sometimes it's difficult when we are living in a sinful situation to come to Christ on our own, because we may not know what he has to offer. So it's important sometimes to seek help from godly people, from professionals. And this is something we are discussing in our group this morning in Sabbath school, this is something that God supports. Because sometimes, we are so damaged by sin that we need that additional help. Just like, at one point, there was so much trash for a while, we didn't pick up trash. So it was too much to handle. So I talked to a neighbor of ours who works for VDOT, and then he told me that VDOT provides these orange bags, so you just put all the trash. Usually people do this kind of things on a weekend, and then they just collect all these trashes. You leave the bag by the road, you call VDOT, and then they come and pick it up. So sometimes, by me going to someone who works in that field, I was able to learn something how to handle with that. And that's no different when we are dealing with some kind of sins in our lives. Sometimes, we may have drug addiction or whatever the situation is. We need some help from others, from people who know how to deal with the situation. So this principle is found in Proverbs 15:22. It says, without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. Also Galatians 6:2, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. We are talking about, again, in Sabbath school this morning, because we live in a community. God didn't intend us to live by ourselves. And when we help someone overcoming sin in their lives, it's not just that individual who benefits from it. We find maybe even more pleasure in doing that. So it's a blessing both ways. So that's what it means here. And so fulfill the law of Christ, which he said it's better to give than to receive. So Proverbs 3:27 says, withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. And lastly, 1 Thessalonians 5:11, wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also ye do. So I think, I was thinking about examples in the Bible of this, and I think the Apostle Paul is a good example of someone who helped others living a life of sin and coming to Christ. All right, so lesson number 5. So dealing with sin is a daily, constant chore as long as we live. How many of you here have heard someone saying, I was saved in 1977? I think that's a dangerous statement, because what does God give us? Choice, right? He gives us choice. He doesn't force anything upon us. So if I have the choice to accept him today, so does it mean tomorrow I don't have the choice to reject him? And unfortunately, people do that. They come to Christ, they see the benefit, they live a godly life, but whatever trash comes in their life, they decide they don't want to do it anymore, and then unfortunately they lose their salvation. So this is a constant, it's a daily thing. So even though we constantly remove trash from our road, new trash keeps coming. That's the reality. And sometimes, we clean up the road, and when we start doing this, there used to be a lot of trash, but now, not a lot like many roads, but still. But since we start doing it, some days there's nothing, and we really enjoy it. And then, the following day we may find, one here, one there. So now what happened is, if we decide, okay, I'm not going to pick it up today, I'm not going to pick it up tomorrow, it just piles up. Okay, and then when you need to deal with that, it's overwhelming. So it's so much easier, because before I used to take one of these supermarket plastic bags. Now I have some smaller bags, so I usually just take that one, and it's enough. So by daily watching and handling, the burden becomes much lighter. Just like, whenever a bad thought comes to your mind, a temptation to do something that's wrong, if you deal with that right away, it becomes so much more manageable, Now, there is this statement here that describes this from Acts of the Apostles, page 560. It says, "Sanctification is not the work of a moment, an hour, a day, but of a lifetime." So the reality is, trash is not going to keep coming on the road. I'll have to continue doing this as long as I want to have that road clean. Matthew 26:41, it says, "Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." So this is a reality that we need to live with. So in our lives, we are also, we must constantly be vigilant, watchful, because the trash of sin that comes because of the trash that comes our way. So in 1 Peter 5:8, we have this counsel: "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walks about seeking whom he may devour." So this is truly a reality, as we've been studying now in Ephesians. And another quotation here from Testimonies, Volume 6, page 116. It says, "If the life we live in this world is wholly for Christ, it is a life of daily surrender." Because sometimes, unfortunately, we live in a world of sin. We are born with some tendencies, and it's sad because sometimes you hear people saying, "I was born this way, so that's how I'm going to live. There's nothing wrong with it." So I always like to use this comparison. Let's say I'm kleptomaniac. Is it okay for me to steal from other people because this is how I was born, or I've been like that since I was little? It's not, So it's with any sin. So we may have the propensity to sin, but it doesn't mean that we cannot overcome it. It's a matter of surrender. All right, so we're getting closer. So lesson number 6. We can become desensitized by living among trash. And then as I was writing this, I remembered the walking with the Andresses, once, and we passed by this house that all around the house, it's hard for you to imagine, you'd have to see it. There was trash all around the house, in front of the house. It was like piles of trash. And I think a few years later, they push all the trash back to the house. I think you still see the piles there. But that didn't happen overnight. I think if it did, they would be in shock, what happened here. But it becomes so desensitized sometimes with sin because you just get used to it. So that's a very dangerous situation to be in. And also, those who work in rescue squad, they know that sometimes, people, like usually they're lonely, they eat and they just throw things besides their bed, and newspaper, soda cans, cigarette boxes, and so on and so forth. And it just piles up. It becomes even a fire hazard. So in Romans 1:28 it says, "And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient." And again, going back to that principle, God gave us the freedom of choice. So if we choose not to follow him, he's not going to force us. That will not be love. Who likes to be forced? Imagine your spouse forcing you to love him or her. Is that really love? That's not love. Romans 1:28, in a different version, the modern English version, it says, "And since they did not see it fit to acknowledge God, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not proper." So I think it's, puts it in a kind of, same perspective, but in a clear way. So very dangerous to be desensitized by sin. So lesson number 7, whatever choices we make, they will not only affect us, but also others. Again, we live in a community, so we have children who are observing us, and people in general. Everybody's watching, what we do. So by cleaning up the trash on the road, we are not only enjoying and having the clean road, but our neighbors and all those who pass on the road, they enjoy it. It's such a pleasure when I walk, even when I drive there. It's a beautiful scenery. There's no distraction. So it's truly wonderful. So, one of our neighbors stopped me the other day. Alina was in Europe at that time. So I saw her going to her garden, and then she walked towards me, and then she had a big tomato, and she said, "Here, thank you so much for doing that." Also, before this, we were walking early in the morning, and our neighbor came and started talking to us, and he gave us beets and a few produce, and thanked us also for doing that. And once one of the other neighbor stopped the car and said, "Thank you so much for doing this." So people were watching. We didn't realize that they were seeing us doing that, but believe me, they are watching us. So in Matthew 5:16 it says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." So we've been praying for our community, and I think this is a good way, to open up, and talk to people, and so they know why we do what we do. And Ephesians 2:10 it says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God has before ordained that we should walk in them." In Galatians 6:9 it says, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up," which is so true. Now, the last lesson. We have the choice to become a positive or a negative influence on others, which is kind of related to what I said. So by getting rid of the trash in our road, we encourage others to either do the same, or at least be an encouragement for them not to throw trash. Like I said, before the next morning I would see more and more. Now there's still some, but not as much. So I don't know exactly what happened, but I believe that some people may have seen us picking up trash, when they drive, and they may say, okay, I feel bad that, these people are picking up my trash, so maybe they have stopped. So we may be an influence. And likewise, when we get rid of the trash in our lives, we are not only reaping the benefits for not, suffering the consequences of sin, but also we are an encouragement for other people to do the same, because we are always being watched. So in Hebrews 10:24 it says, "And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works." And Titus 2:14 and 3:1 it says, talking about Jesus, it says, "Who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works. Put them in mind to be subject to principalities and powers, to obey magistrates, to be ready to every good work." And I would like to end this with a quotation from My Life Today, page 267. Actually, this was for September 20th. It says, "Having therefore these promises, dear beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God." So this is from 2 Corinthians 7:1. So it says, "The formation of a right character is the work of a lifetime, and is the outgrowth of prayerful meditation united with a grand purpose. The excellence of character that you possess must be the result of your own effort." So we have a work to do. It's not just not going to come to us. We have to cultivate. "Friends may encourage you, but they cannot do the work for you. Wishing, sighing, dreaming will never make you great or good. You must climb. The conversation we have by the fireside, the books we read, the business we transact, all are agents in forming our character, and day by day decide our eternal destiny." So my prayer is that you consider, for yourself, those who have children, how we can help someone to overcome sin in their lives, and sometimes it starts with us by giving an example. And it's a good thing that we are not alone to do this. We have the promise from Jesus that he can bear our burdens. So with this, we're going to be singing hymn, I believe it's 477. $499. What a friend we have in Jesus. Hymn 499.